Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I left home 27 hours ago and just arrived about a half an hour ago. It's been quite an ordeal. I lost my luggage. I missed my first flight because of a major car accident in Denver. Put me on another flight that came in 6 hours, left 6 hours late, so I flew into Detroit at 1:30 this morning. Got to the airport, they didn't have a hotel voucher, so we had to wrangle and get that taken care of. Got 3 hours of sleep last night, and here I am. I wouldn't miss this for the world. You know, this is great. I love these events. I do a lot of solar energy fairs, renewable energy fairs. It's just great to be around people like you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be part of this event today. I want to thank all the organizers and all the volunteers who helped make this happen. This is an incredible event, a lot of work behind the scenes. So thank all of you, and thank you for inviting me here. And thank you for coming out to make this event successful. As Tom mentioned, I am an author. I've published a couple dozen books now. And the last 10 years or so, I've been focusing all my effort on renewable energy and green building. And I have the dubious distinction of having a book banned in Texas. So, it's a book about the subject that we're going to be talking about, renewable energy. And it's a college textbook that was banned because it was viewed as un-American to be talking about renewable energy in Texas. Even though Texas is a leader in wind energy development in the United States. But anyway, that's a whole other story. I'm a passive solar design consultant. That's what I do in my off hours when I'm not writing. I do a lot of teaching. I teach at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. I teach courses on energy and sustainability. I lecture all over the country. I've had a great time talking at events like this, doing workshops. But I also live what I profess here. I've been living with renewable energy for almost 30 years. Well, actually 30 years now, to this day. And almost exclusively on wind and solar for the last 10 years. So it's been a great experience, and one of the reasons I write so much is I want to help people avoid the mistakes that I've made. So and that's been a main mission of mine, you know, to help people understand how we do this and how we do it right. As you all know, we're in a real serious hurt over energy these days. We're not doomed by any means. And if I leave you with anything today, it's that we have the technologies. You know, the technologies are here. We have the technologies. Some of them need improvement and efficiencies. We have the knowledge. There's no question about that. Clearly, we have the money to make a renewable energy transition happen. The money is available. The only things that we seem to lack are time and political will. And also personal will. You know, a lot of us are screaming about renewable energy, but we need more action at the individual level too. I don't think we can sit back and wait for the federal government to do this for us. So we lack political will. We seem to lack we seem to have a considerable amount of inertia in the general public, and we really lack some time. But I'm firmly convinced that we can build a sustainable future based on clean, reliable and affordable renewable energy. I strongly believe that. We're a pretty smart species. We're a pretty smart species. I have great faith in us as a species. One example of how smart we are, there's a first grade teacher who asked her students to finish these famous quotes. So she would give them the first part of the quote and then asked her first graders to finish the quotes. Things like, two's company, three's the Musketeers. Then you can't teach an old dog new math. Don't bite the hand that looks dirty. And this one's been watching way too much TV. No news is impossible. Now Ben Franklin wouldn't like this one. A penny saved is not much. So there's a future economist. Here's a future entomologist. Strike while the iron's hot, while the bug is close. Here's one of my favorites. Better safe than punch a fifth grader. All right. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Cry and you have to blow your nose. Couple more. I like this one. This is really, truly one of my favorites. As a future child psychologist, children should be seen and not spanked or grounded. I can see my kids saying that. I'm grounding, Dad. And then here's the last one. Better late than pregnant. Anyway, that seems more like an 8th grader. Or somebody's been listening to Mom and Dad talk for a while. So I want to talk to you about curing our addiction to oil. Are we really addicted to oil in this country? I mean, is this really a problem or just a minor annoyance or inconvenience? And thirdly, what are our options? What do we have in the sidelines that can help us cure this addiction? And what are some of the pitfalls that we must avoid? So that's where we're going to go today. Are we addicted to oil? I want to talk a little bit about this addiction to oil. Talk about it, whether it's a problem or not, and what are some of our options, and what are some of the pitfalls. Now, President Bush said that we are addicted to oil. He flew out to Colorado, made a fabulous speech at the National Renewable Energy Society, or National Renewable Energy Lab. They had just cut the budget prior to his speech, and then miraculously found the $30 million. But he came out and said, we're addicted to oil and we're committed to alternative energy. We're committed to alternative energy. And they raised the National Renewable Energy budget by 0.2%. So it's now about $135 million a year, which is maybe 2 hours of military spending. So if the president says we're addicted to oil, why, oh why, are we prescribing more of the same drug? Now, lawyers would say that I basically asked and answered my own question. We prescribe more oil because we're addicted to it. We can't live without it. We can't see any other way. Oil runs through our economy. It's the lifeblood of our economy. And it provides many products and services that we're not even aware of. So the needle is in the vein and we continue to shoot up. But there are some mistaken notions about oil. Most people think that oil is gasoline, that it's primarily a transportation fuel. And indeed, that's true. We do get a lot of transportation fuel from oil. We get jet fuel, we get diesel fuel, we get gasoline. All of those are extracted from oil. But in fact, oil is a very complex mixture of hydrocarbons. A barrel of oil contains about 3,000 different chemicals. We get mothballs from oil, we get paraffin wax from oil, we get all the plastics, the synthetic clothing, even medicine. Most of the medicine that you take, whether it's prescription or over-the-counter drugs, most of that comes from chemical feedstocks that are derived from oil, that are extracted from this complex mixture of organic compounds. So oil really is crucial to our society. 41% of our nation's energy comes from oil. Currently, 41%. And lest we forget, oil is big business. And it's big business with lots of friends in very high places. Never underestimate the power of money to dictate the future of a nation. So, unfortunately, our addiction to oil, I think, is killing us. It's slowly sapping our economic vitality, and we're getting hammered in many, many different ways. One of the prices for our addiction to oil is global climate change. Global climate change is very real. Don't let anyone tell you it's not. I just flew here from Colorado, and we are in another year of horrendous drought. We had forest fire warnings in January of this year. January, in the state of Colorado. By March, we'd had 110 forest and grass fires in the state of Colorado. You fly into it, it is just bone dry, as much of the West is, and we've been that way for the better part of 25 years. So we are paying very, very dearly for this addiction to oil. 19 of the hottest years in the past 100 years have occurred since 1986. 19 of the hottest years in the past 100 years have occurred since 1986. Now, it's not rare to have a hot year now and then. And people will say, well, global warming, you know, it could very well just be climatic variation. It's not rare to have a hot year every once in a while. To have 2 in a row is pretty rare. To have 19 of the hottest years in the past 20 years occur since 1986 is something to look for. If you look at global climate, if you look at graphs of global climate, you'll see where actually the last 1,000 years temperature has been declining, and then in the last 20 years it's just going through the roof. So we're paying for it very, very dearly with massive forest fires out west. We had a 168,000 acre fire just 6 miles south of my home a couple years ago. We're paying it in dollars and cents for property damage from more violent and more frequent storms. We're getting tornadoes in January and February, violent storms. We're all paying for it in higher home insurance premiums. And it's costing us lives. Hurricane Katrina cost at least 1,000 lives. In 2003, very few people know this, in 2003, 20,000 people perished in France as a result of record-breaking heat. 20,000 people perished in France because of record-breaking heat. So we're paying for this in a variety of ways. Most of us are familiar with the higher commodity costs. We're paying more at the gas pump. And those of us who are heated with oil are paying higher and higher home heating costs. And then there's the costly war. We're spending now, according to some fairly reliable sources, $1 billion a day to wage war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Soldiers are dying to protect our oil supply. Even before the war began, we were spending about $50 billion a year just to protect oil tankers in and out of the Persian Gulf, to transport about $10 billion worth of oil. So we're paying for this, for our addiction, in many, many ways. We're paying in terms of our national security. Are we more secure today or less secure? And why are we so insecure? Why do we have terrorists hammering at our doors or knocking at our doors? So what do we do? What do we do for oil? The most common answer is get more energy, feed the addiction. This we call, in the energy field, we call supply side management. You run short of something, you get more. The problem with all this is that we're blindly pursuing more energy almost at any price. Now, politicians who understand that we have an addiction to oil are still favor some pretty ridiculous solutions to this problem. One of the solutions that we hear a lot about is nuclear energy. We need more nuclear energy. And you'll see newspaper reporters, you'll see politicians in the same breath say we need to relieve ourselves from foreign oil, our addiction to oil. We want to decrease our dependency on oil, and we need nuclear energy to do that. Now, problem is, very little electricity in this country is actually generated from oil. It's under 5% of our electricity is generated from oil. Nuclear power is not going to solve that issue. It's not going to emancipate us from this addiction to oil. So we need to think very, very carefully about what the options are. What does oil provide us today? What are the products that we get from oil? What are the services, more importantly, that oil delivers? And we need to think about how we replace those services. How do we transport ourselves? How do we heat our homes? How do we make plastics? How do we make medicines? How do we make synthetic clothing? Those are the sorts of things that we have to start thinking about, not just get more oil at any cost. One of the price tags that our politicians would have us pay is drilling for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Politicians who agree that we're addicted to oil say, let's go into the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Now, there's about 1,200 miles of coastline, the North Alaska coastline. There's about 1,200 miles. All but 100 of it is open to oil development, and that's the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and we must have that for energy security. We're willing, really, to rape and pillage that wonderful area to feed our addiction to oil. And what's the benefit? Probably at most about 3 or 4 billion barrels of oil. Now that sounds like a lot of oil, But put it into perspective, that's about half the oil that the United States consumes in a given year, in a single year. It's about half a year's supply of oil. We're willing to go into that area to destroy it for a half a year's supply of oil. We could do the same thing very easily through energy conservation. All right, there are other problems with oil besides environmental and economic and national security issues. One of those problems is that we're running out of cheap oil. There's some wonderful workshops tomorrow. What time's your workshop, guys?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock and 10:03. There's a two-part workshop called Crude Awakening, Peak Oil. And I'm going to give you some of the highlights of this, and I want you to, but it's really worth going to see if you guys have the time. So we're running out of cheap oil. We're not running out of oil. There's still a lot of oil in the earth, but we're running out of cheap oil, the sweet crude oil that's cheap and easy to extract. What's happening, we think, is that oil production, oil extraction from the earth is peaking. The global oil extraction may very well be peaking. In fact, very quietly last year, 2005, ExxonMobil came out and said they think that global oil production, extraction, is going to peak somewhere between 2005 and 2010. We don't know. We may already have peaked. Some experts think we peaked last year. One even predicted it was Thanksgiving of the year 2005. We won't know for a while. We won't know until we look in that rearview mirror. When the production extraction levels start declining, we won't know for sure. But the point is that we're very, very close. If we haven't peaked already, it's very likely going to occur in a short period within all of our lifetimes. And what does peak oil mean to us? It means the end of cheap oil. It means that a resource that we're terribly dependent on, not just us in the United States, but people all over the world, incredibly dependent on oil. It means that it's going to get much more expensive. And as demand for oil rises, as India industrializes, and as China industrializes and buys more and more vehicles, we're going to be looking at a tremendous crunch in supply and demand. That the supply will not be able to keep up with demand, and of course that can result in some fairly catastrophic economic consequences to us. Oil wells are running dry. Most of the major oil fields have already peaked, and some people think that the big fields in Saudi Arabia have peaked. We currently consume about 22 billion barrels of sweet crude oil per year. About 22 billion barrels. And we find only about 4 billion new barrels. So we're using a lot more than we discover. And the only way that can happen, that can continue, is because we're extracting oil from these large reserves. But we haven't made a major oil discovery since the 1960s. You know, last year I was teaching a course on energy at Colorado College, and my students brought this newspaper article and said, "See, Dan, you're wrong. They just found this major oil field off the coast of Great Britain." And so we looked at it. It was, I don't know, 400 million barrels of oil, some really minuscule finding. And it was like 4 days or four or 5 days of global oil consumption. The big oil fields have been discovered, we think, and are running out. And we, who are addicted to oil, could be facing some very, very severe consequences. We are, in essence, pinning our hopes on a declining resource. But that's not all. Natural gas isn't much better. Oil or natural gas production extraction in the United States peaked in 1973, and if you look at a graph of natural gas production, it peaked in 1973, it sort of fell, and it's pretty much plateaued. It's been on a plateau ever since the 70s. A lot of people think that somewhere around 2008 we're going to see a fairly sharp decline in natural gas production in the United States, despite the fact that we're drilling like crazy to find more and more natural gas. In Canada, they drill 6,500 new wells, gas wells a year in Canada, just to keep production from falling. In Texas, they drill 5,500 new wells a year, just to keep production from falling. And the problem is that we keep hitting smaller and smaller pockets of natural gas. Within 2 years, 50% of the gas is gone. Within 4 years, it's 75% depleted. So we have to continue to explore more and drill more to find ever smaller pockets of natural gas. Natural gas currently supplies about 23% of our nation's energy consumption. So you've got 41% in oil and 23% in natural gas, and they're both on the decline. Now, there's more gas internationally, globally. There's more natural gas that's available to us, but we're not set up to import natural gas. We currently import about 2% of our natural gas, and we are not set up to bring in more. You can compress it and bring it in on tankers. We are not set up. There are only 4 ports in the United States that accept natural gas. And even if we could ramp up, build more ports and more ships and get the infrastructure going, it's believed that natural gas production globally is going to peak somewhere around 215, maybe 225. So the global supplies aren't that great. Bottom line is that we've got to get serious about this energy thing real soon. Very, very soon. And I'm hoping all of you will go home from this fair with a renewed vigor and a renewed interest in energy efficiency and in renewables to help us kind of wean ourselves from these declining natural or fossil fuels. So what energy resources do we need to tap into? How are we going to heat and cool our homes? Oil shale. How are we going to cook our food? How are we going to grow? There's always a wise guy. How are we going to cook our food? And how are we going to provide electricity? How are we going to meet our transportation needs? What fuels are we going to turn to? Well, it might surprise you, but the immediate answer is actually none. We can begin immediately by pursuing an energy efficiency strategy, an energy efficiency program, a radical energy efficiency program in the United States. Do you know the current budget, federal budget for energy conservation is $886 million a year, 68 or 86. Okay, under $900 million a year. Okay, that's 23 hours of military expenditure. Okay, we need to quadruple, quintuple the amount of energy that we spend making America more efficient. But conservation is a 4-letter word that Americans just don't want to hear, you know? So we call it demand-side management. It sounds a lot more technical. We're not going to conserve our way out of this. We're going to manage demand. Okay. Energy efficiency is the fastest, the cheapest way to generate more energy. Tapping into our waste. How much energy do we waste? The estimates vary. Some people estimate that we waste at least half. Others say up to 75% of the energy that we consume as a nation we waste, that is not put to useful to work for us. That's the dark cloud. Is that as a society, we couldn't be more wasteful of energy than we are now. I mean, as a society, we just couldn't waste more energy. I mean, unless we just poked holes in our gas tanks and let the stuff leak out, we really couldn't be much more wasteful. That's the dark cloud on America's horizon. The silver lining behind that cloud is that there's gold, there's money in those mountains of waste. Is that by tapping into that inefficiency, we have a way to wean ourselves from oil and to make a smooth transition to renewable energy. It won't be easy, but the potential is there. The potential to reduce energy consumption dramatically and not threaten lifestyle. To in fact enhance our lifestyle. It's there. Energy conservation is really the same as new energy. It's really the same as new energy. Okay? It's cheaper and faster to bring on than new energy, but if all of us in this room, for example, could find a way to slash our energy consumption by 50%, that energy that we release, that we free up, is equivalent to the energy companies that supply our needs finding that much energy. Okay? So if all of us could find ways to slash our energy consumption in our homes, in transportation, our offices, in our lives in general, that energy that we free up is equivalent to the energy companies that serve us finding that energy, bringing that raw energy onto the grid or into the system. So I really encourage people to think about energy conservation, energy efficiency as a new source of energy. It truly is. Except it's cheaper, it's much faster to bring online, and it's a hell of a lot better for the environment than burning more fossil fuel or nuclear energy or oil shale or tar sands. And it's renewable too. What we do to save energy, the energy savings that we make every year is renewable. You can cut half your energy use by upgrading your home. That energy is available year after year, the energy you've freed up. So it is, in fact, a renewable source of energy, a renewable source of clean energy. Okay? And I have a gift for all of you, except it's in my luggage, which the airline lost too, on top of everything else. I have a gift for you. I put together a $120 shopping list. It's an energy conservation shopping list. And I was going to make it available at the booth. I'm in booth 46 right after this talk. But I've got the master, so if you bring a piece of paper, I've got a shopping list. It's $120 worth of things that you can buy, including a water heater blanket, some compact fluorescent light bulbs, water-efficient shower heads, some caulk, a solar clothes dryer, pipe insulation. It'll cost you $120 to pick it up, and it's guaranteed to save you about $360 a year. Okay? That $120 investment, if you buy it and install these devices in your home, will save you approximately $360 a year. Maybe more, maybe a little bit less, but a huge savings. If my stock portfolio performed 1/100th as well as this, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be a billionaire. So anyway. So come by, I've got the shopping list, and also, if you want, you can pick up a copy of my newest book called The Homeowner's Guide to Renewable Energy that has a chapter on energy efficiency in the home, and it's got all kinds of ideas on renewable energy for the home. So there are lots and lots of options. Once we really get serious about energy efficiency, there are lots of options, and I don't let anyone tell you that we don't have sufficient renewable energy resources in this country. Don't let anybody tell you we don't have sufficient renewable energy resources in this country. Maybe not immediately. They're not here immediately. We can't flick a button or flick a switch and just convert to a renewable energy society. But we have vast resources of renewable energy. There was an undersecretary in the Department of Energy during the Carter administration did a calculation of how much energy we have in this country using existing technologies. Okay, that was back in the 1980s. And he said that we have the equivalent of 80 to 90 billion barrels worth of renewable energy available to us in the United States. 80 to 90 billion barrels. Mind you, we consume only 7 billion barrels of oil. Okay, so we have bucket loads of renewable energy available to us year after year after year using the technologies of the 1980s. So, the 70s, that's right, 70s. When did he get out of office? Oh, there was Ronald Reagan in there, wasn't there? Okay, I forgot. And Ronald Reagan's definition of conservation was?
Sitting in the dark in the cold.
Freezing in the dark, yes, yes. In fact, it's just the opposite. He took the solar panels off the roof of the White House. Anyway, it's going to take a while to make this energy transition. And the way we transport ourselves, the way we heat and cool our homes will be radically different in 50 years. Many of us think it's going to take a good 50 years to make a transition to a renewable energy economy. But it can happen. The energy resources are vast. You tap the wind energy in North and South Dakota, it's enough, if you could, it's enough electricity to provide the entire United States. If you could collect the solar energy falling on a state as minuscule as Connecticut, that would provide all of our energy needs if you could capture that energy. So the resources are vast. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not possible. It's going to take some time, all right? But as a homeowner, before you start thinking about renewable energy, the very most important thing, the first rule of renewable energy is efficiency first. Make your home as energy efficient first before you put a solar hot water system or solar electric or wind system or solar hot air or solar hot water. I already said that one. But before you make any of these changes, make sure that your home is as energy efficient as you possibly can first. For every dollar that you invest on efficiency, you'll save between $3 and $5 in system cost. So every buck that you invest in making your home more efficient, you'll save between $3 and $5 in system costs. So efficiency as a nation, and efficiency as individuals interested in solar or renewable energy technologies. So let's talk about some of the specifics. How do we heat our homes, for example, in the future? How will we heat up our homes? Remember, efficiency first. Seal up the leaks in our homes. You know, you take an old home in the United States, an old home, and you add up all the leaks in the building envelope, leaks around windows, around doors, where the plumbing penetrates the foundation or electrical penetrates the walls, electrical outlets. You add up all these little leaks in a house, and it's equivalent to a 3-foot by 3-foot window open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Okay? So you add up all the leaks in our homes. They're virtually Swiss cheese, the older homes. The newer homes are a little better. They're only about a 2-foot by 2-foot window open 24 hours a day. Now my students and I at Colorado College, we often go out into the neighborhood and we will energy retrofit homes as a service to the community. And we'll go into some of these older homes and we'll set up this device called a blower door test. It's a big device that you hook onto the front door. You open the front door, you put this thing on, it's got a big fan. You close all the windows and the outside doors and you crank this fan on and it simulates a 20-mile-an-hour wind. Okay, so it simulates a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing on the house. And you can tell with the gauges on this thing how leaky the house is. And we're getting air leakages of 8,600 cubic feet of air per minute under a 20-mile-an-hour wind. Now that probably doesn't mean anything to you. A cubic foot of air is about a basketball. So when the wind's blowing on these houses, they're getting 8,600 basketball full of air blowing through the cracks in the building envelope of these homes. And we're able to go in an afternoon, add some insulation, seal up these leaks, and cut that by half. And these are kids who aren't experienced in this. We're just able to go in there with a little bit of caulk and some weather stripping and some foam gaskets to seal electrical outlets and light switches. And we're able to cut that leakage by half. Now, a lot of these homes have old windows which leak like crazy, and I know we could cut the air leakage if we could replace those windows, and we're not going to do that because who wants a bunch of students, who are majoring in political science, replacing the windows of your house? We've offered, but no one's ever taken us up on that one. But with new windows or storm windows, we could cut the infiltration rate in these homes again in half, maybe even more. So that's the first thing. How do we heat our homes? Well, we don't. We just reduce the leakage. We just reduce that leakage. Add insulation. Most of the homes in this country are woefully under-insulated. We go up into the attics of these houses and there's 2 inches of insulation. And I don't know how these old buggers did it, but they were tough. They 2 inches of insulation. So there should be 10 or more. So we go in and add insulation as well. Add insulation, new windows, new storm doors, new storm windows. And once you make the home energy efficient, once you seal it up and make it energy efficient, then it's time to think, okay, how do I heat it? What else do I do to heat the home is a better way of asking that question. What else do I do? Well, there are lots of options. There's a passive solar retrofit option. In fact, that article that they just mentioned, I haven't even seen this article yet in Natural Home Magazine, is on, I think that one's on, no it isn't, that's another one, never mind. Anyway, I don't know what they published, but I just published an article on passive solar retrofits. How do you make a home passive solar? How do you heat it passively, an existing home? Yeah, I published it in a new magazine called Ecological Home Ideas. Wonderful, brand new magazine, just out. Basically, passive solar is a heating system with only one moving part, and that's the sun. They didn't like that in Texas either. That's another story, but anyway. So basically, if your house is oriented to the south, what you try to do is open up the south face, add some more windows, put a attached sun space on to capture that low-angled winter sun. Now, I heat my house. I live at 8,000 feet above sea level. 8,000 feet above sea level. We just put gardens in. That's how cold it is. It's not unusual to get snow in the middle of June. It's a very cold climate. I built a passive solar home 10 years ago. I moved in 10 years ago to this state. Passive solar. It's oriented to the south. Windows are concentrated on the south side. It's got good overhangs to protect the house from the high-angle winter sun. It's really well insulated. And we heat that home entirely with the sun, and we use about 1 quart of wood a year as a backup heat. Now my neighbors are paying $300 to $500 a month heating their homes with natural gas. $300 to $500 a month. We bring in natural gas for the stove and for a water heater, and our monthly bill for years has been $12 or $13. $10 to read the meter and $2 or $3 for natural gas. They got a racket going there. And recently, with the higher cost of natural gas, it recently went up to 16 bucks, and I am really steamed about that. So we heat this house passively, and we've probably saved between $10,000 and $15,000 in the last 10 years by passively heating this home. And guess what? That has paid for my solar electric system. I put in a solar electric system which cost about $15,000, and so the savings in passive solar have actually paid for solar electric. So we got to be creative about how we make these things work. So passive solar retrofits are one option. There's another way of heating our homes that we'll see more and more of. Those are solar hot water systems. And I haven't had a chance, I just got here an hour or so ago, I haven't had a chance to look around, but I'm sure there's some solar hot water vendors here. So take a look at those systems. They heat a liquid, either water or a food-grade antifreeze. They heat that and with a panel on the roof, and they transfer that heat into a storage compartment inside the house, a tank, and then they use that heat. They draw out that heat at night, either through radiant floor or a hot water baseboard system, baseboard hot water, or forced air. So you can capture sunlight during the day, capture that energy, store it, and use it at night. There's another technology that's pretty exciting called the solar hot air panel. And I believe there's a manufacturer here who's selling solar hot air panels. They're basically panels that you mount on the south side of your home or on your roof. They take room air, heat it up, and then circulate it back into the house. A pretty neat technology. And at least there's one vendor here has a fantastic idea. They've got a little solar electric panel that runs the fan for it. So and I just installed one in my house as an experiment for an article I'm doing for Mother Earth News. And the sum total of the electrical connection was 2 wires hooked up to a thermostat, and that was it, because you've got a solar panel that runs the fan for the solar hot air panel. You mount it on the wall or your roof, you can hook up those 2 wires and you're done. You've got a system that runs without outside electricity. So those are some of the options: passive solar retrofits, solar hot water, solar hot air, energy efficient wood stoves, and another new technology if you're building a new house is a ground source heat pump. A ground source heat pump, or a heat pump in general, is a heating device that extracts heat from the environment. Even on a cold winter day, the ground source pulls heat out of the earth. Okay? It has some pipes that circulate a fluid in the ground 6 or 8 feet down, and they extract heat from the earth, they concentrate it, and then transfer it into the house. There's also an air source heat pump, which is better in a warmer climate, that, like the southeastern United States. They still have a little bit of winter, 4 or 5 weeks of winter, bless their hearts. But they can extract heat from the air and concentrate it using refrigeration technology and transfer that heat inside. Very efficient forms of heating our homes, and you're going to see a lot more of those. The heat pumps, especially the ground source, is very expensive in retrofitting. So if you're thinking about finding some other source of heat, that's probably not the way to go, because it's pretty expensive to dig up a yard and bury the pipe. All right. So how are we doing time-wise here? So there are other ways we can talk about how we supply hot water in the future. That's going to be a challenge for us as natural gas supplies fall and as the price of natural gas increases. You can get a copy of my book. I've got chapters on each one of these. How do we generate electricity? We're a little bit limited in how we can actually generate electricity as homeowners. We have the option of solar electric systems. We have wind energy systems. And if you live in a mountainous area or a hilly area and you've got some running water, there's microhydro. So we're a little bit restricted in how we can generate electricity to make up for declining natural gas supplies. Now, what I want to get across today, though, is that many of these technologies are cost competitive. You'll hear people say, well, solar energy is unproven or it's too costly and we can't pursue it. And you hear this all the time, wind energy, oh, it's too expensive. A lot of people are operating using really old information. It's a very exciting time for renewable energy because many of the technologies that we're looking at, solar hot water, wind energy systems, even solar electricity can be very cost competitive, but you got to get creative about it in some cases too. For example, when I built my house, I moved in 10 years ago, almost to this day. When I built my house, the electric company wanted $2,000 to hook me up from the road to my house. They wanted $2,000. I'm 150 feet from the road. Plus, they wanted $20 a month to read my electrical meter. Because I happen to be, I get natural gas from one company and electric from another. So I have one person would read my natural gas meter, and the other one charged me $20 a month to read my electric meter. So I got to thinking about this. I said, okay, if I avoid the cost of hooking it to the electrical grid, I saved $2,000. That paid for my battery bank. So thank you very much. And then every month that they don't read my meter saves me $20. So over a year, every year, they buy me a solar panel. So over the last 10 years, not only have I saved about $15,000 in passive solar, but by avoiding the hookup costs and by avoiding the meter reading costs, I have bought 10 of my panels and paid for my battery bank. So you've got to be creative. If you're building a house more than a few tenths of a mile from the electrical grid, it's often cheaper to put a solar electric system in than it is to string wires. It can cost you about $20,000 to string electrical wires a couple tenths of a mile. If you're going a half a mile, it can easily cost you $50,000 to bring electricity to your house. And that doesn't buy you a single kilowatt hour of electricity. That just gets you electric poles and wires. And the privilege to now start paying for that and to pay for all the electricity that you're going to consume on top of that. And for $50,000, you can get one heck of a solar electric system, my friends. So you've got to be creative. And a lot of states now are offering incentives. Local utilities are offering incentives for solar renewable energy systems. The federal government, the new energy bill that finally passed after 6 years of wrangling in secrecy, the new energy bill provides incentives. The federal government will pay you a third of your system cost if you're thinking about doing a solar electric system or solar hot water system. I believe they'll pay a third of the system cost up to $2,000. Now, they're not going to write you a check. It's a tax credit, but it comes right off your taxes. So there are all kinds of incentives from local utilities, even from county governments, from state government, and now the federal government. So there are all kinds of ways to make these technologies even more cost competitive. So anyway, find creative solutions to make this happen. Now, I want to turn finally to transportation, because this is really going to be one of our biggest challenges. How do we transport ourselves? How does America move goods and move people? How do we do that? Well, of course, I'm going to harp on efficiency first. Always efficiency. Some things that you may not want to hear. Drive the speed limit. I think that, keep your tires inflated. Very simple things that cost us nothing. Combined trips. All those things that we've been talking about for 30 years and no one's been listening to. Use mass transit. Do you know a single bus in New York City replaces about 40 cars. Keeps about 40 cars off the road. A light rail train displaces about 1,000 cars. So we're going to see more and more, I think, in the future, more and more energy efficiency through mass transit. And then there are more efficient vehicles. And a lot of people, even good environmentalists, I heard one interviewed on TV the other day, was asked, she was up there complaining about the price of oil and the cost of oil and all this stuff. And the person moderating the panel asked her, he said, well, what do you drive? What kind of car do you drive? And well, she sort of started squirming and sitting. She says, well, I'll get an energy efficient car when they make sense. I'll get one when they make sense. Well, give me a break. Back in 1980, I had a Datsun 210 MPG, and I drove from Butte, Montana to Portland, Oregon on 1 tank of gas. Energy efficient vehicles are available. You don't have to, if you can't afford a hybrid, you can simply get a more energy efficient vehicle. Hybrids I love hybrids. I think it's a great transition vehicle. Everybody know what a hybrid is? It's got a little gas. I have a little Toyota Prius, and I get 53 miles per gallon. And I live in a pretty hilly area. I drive pretty carefully, but 53 miles per gallon. I've had it for almost 2 years. So it works. The technology works. When you open the hood and look in, there's this little dinky gas engine about that big. You think someone put a lawnmower engine in there. Next to it is a little electric motor. The gas is about 75 horsepower. The electric is about 65. But what most Americans don't understand is you really don't need a lot of horsepower to make your car move. You need a lot to get it going. You need a lot to get those things moving. And that's why we have heavy vehicles and big engines. Once you're cruising in a big car, you know, a big van, you only need about 65 horsepower to move along about 65, 70 miles an hour. So the hybrid technology is genius. What it does is it gives you options that you can combine. You can combine the gas and electric to get the horsepower when you really need it. And when you don't, you can go back, you can drop your horsepower and save incredible amounts of energy. Now, there are a lot of hybrids on the market that are a little bit on the light side. Well, that's being kind of generous. Are very much on the light side. So look for a hybrid car. And there are some tax credits for those as well. I think the future of transportation is going to be very diverse. Don't let anybody tell you it's going to be a hydrogen economy, or it's going to be biodiesel, or it's going to be ethanol. I think 50 years from now it's going to be a whole variety of fuels. We'll see a lot more electric vehicles on the road, a lot more people commuting by electric vehicles. Did you know that 90% of all Americans travel under 60 miles a day? 90% of us commute under 60 miles a day. Well, that's perfect for an electric vehicle. If we can make that electricity with clean, renewable resources, we could really solve a lot of our transportation problems just by wind energy and solar electricity pumped into the grid to supply these commuter vehicles. We'll see biodiesel, and I don't know how many of you know about biodiesel. It's just vegetable oil. You chemically react it with methanol and sodium hydroxide, and it produces this fatty acid, this oily mix that burns in a diesel vehicle without any conversion. I have a little garden tractor that we run on biodiesel. No conversion whatsoever. It's beautiful. It's clean. It's a remarkable fuel. We produce very little of it in this country, but I think in the future we'll see more and more biodiesel being produced. And biodiesel is produced from corn oil and canola oil and soybean oil. Any oil can be used, sunflower oil, any oil can be used to make biodiesel. And I think what we'll see in the future, and this may seem kind of cold-hearted, is that America will export less and less food to third world nations. We'll devote more and more of our cropland to making fuel. Because I think the market will probably, that's what my crystal ball up here says, I think that the market will shift and will be less of the breadbasket of the world and more of a fuel farm for Americans. So we'll see more biodiesel. You can make it from manure, you can make it from turkey manure, and you can make biodiesel from algae. We've got a long way to go, but I think that'll be a fuel of the future. And then what about ethanol? Now, a lot of you probably heard ethanol. Oh, that doesn't make sense. And you still hear people say it takes more energy to make ethanol than you get out of it. Well, that happens to be old numbers. That's at least a 10-year-old study done by the oil company. 10 years ago it did. It took more energy to make ethanol than you got out of it. Okay? So it wasn't a good prospect. Today, the net energy efficiency of ethanol has improved dramatically. It's still not very impressive. It's 1.7. What that means is that for every unit of energy you put in, you get 1.7 out. Not very impressive. Oil is about 1 to 9. Okay? About 9. So for every unit of energy you put in to get oil out of the ground, you get 9 units out. So ethanol has a way to go. Now there's a company, Iogen, in Canada that's working on a process that they think will have a net energy efficiency very similar to oil, about 8 or 9. And they're going to make it from cellulose, make it from the waste material left over from a corn production, switchgrass, and a variety of other organic materials where they can break this cellulose down, make the glucose that they need to produce ethanol. So I think we'll see more and more ethanol in our future. You can also burn straight vegetable oil in a diesel vehicle, but don't go out and pour some canola oil down your diesel vehicle in your tank right away, okay? You need a conversion kit in order to make this happen. You need to convert the vehicle to burn vegetable oil. So I think we'll see electric cars. And what about hydrogen? That seems to be the big question. What about hydrogen? Well, hydrogen, I mean, it's the ideal fuel. There are books by Jeremy Rifkin on the hydrogen economy, and I love hydrogen. I mean, I just absolutely love hydrogen. You take water, you split the water molecules using electricity, you get hydrogen and oxygen, You take those two molecules, you feed them into a device called a fuel cell. They combine in there and they produce electricity. And you use that electricity to run an electric motor. And the waste product is water. So, I mean, it's a perfect fuel. It's clean. Everything about it is good except for one fatal flaw. And that is, we don't have supplies of hydrogen in the ground. We can't drill a well and find bucket loads and billions of BTUs of hydrogen. You've got to make it. It takes energy to make it. And right now, it's actually about 3 times more efficient to take that, to take that electricity that you'd use to split water. It's 3 times more efficient just to take that and run an electric car than to take the electricity to split water, to make hydrogen and oxygen, put it in a fuel cell, to make electricity to run a car. So unless we can improve the net energy efficiency of hydrogen dramatically, I'm not sure how much we'll actually see of hydrogen in the future. But don't close the book. If 10 years ago we would have closed the book on ethanol too and said, well, forget it, it's not going to work. We have some pretty ingenious first graders moving up through the ranks. So I want to close by saying we have the technologies. Don't be dismayed by the gloom and doom. We have the knowledge. We know how to make this transition happen. We have the money. If we can spend $1 billion a day in Iraq and Afghanistan, if we could just divert that money or a fraction of that money into becoming serious about energy conservation or renewable energy, we could create an renewable energy future within our lifetime. The only thing we lack is time. We need time. You just can't flick a switch and have a renewable energy economy. The fossil fuel infrastructure is so enormous. There are trillions upon trillions of dollars invested in fossil fuels right now, and you just can't go out and you're just not going to be able to replace it with a flick of the switch or a snap of the fingers. So we can build a better future. And that's what this is really about. You know, we can build a better future. Truly a stronger America. Truly a country that is more secure. A better economy if we get serious about tapping into these clean, reliable, and affordable renewable energy resources. We're a pretty smart species. We can figure this out. We need some time. We need 50 years to make the transition. And we can buy some time by embarking on a radical energy efficiency program. We need action, too, on all our parts. We need all of us to get active. And I always say to audiences, if not us, who's going to do it? If the people in this room aren't going to do it, who's going to do it? And if not now, when are we going to do it? I want to tell just a little story to conclude. It's a story, a friend of mine grew up in rural Wisconsin. I'm heading to the the Midwest Renewable Energy Fair at the end of the week. And my friend grew up in rural Wisconsin, and one of the neighbors had a dog, and it was tied up on the side of the garage, was chained up, a little tiny terrier-type dog, had a chain on, and the dog slept under a Ford pickup truck. And every time the kids wheeled by on their bicycles, this dog used to go racing out, dragging its chain behind it, and right before it got to the end of the chain, so it wouldn't choke itself, it would stop, and it would just turn circles, yapping furiously at these kids as they rode by. And of course, they thought this was just great entertainment to see this absolutely crazy dog that's going berserk at the end of this chain, just twirling in circles. Well, so this went on year after year after year, and eventually the dog got kind of old, and the owners decided that they were going to take the dog inside. So they unhooked it from the chain and tried to encourage it to come in, but the dog, being a creature of habit like most of us, would have nothing to do with indoor habitation. It insisted on sleeping under this rusting Ford pickup truck by the side of the garage. And sure enough, every time the kids went by on their bicycles, this dog would get up, a little bit, a little bit rusty now, barking a little more hoarsely, like some of us, barking furiously as these kids rode by, and he'd race to the end just where the chain used to stop him. And he'd spin circles, no chain, holding him back. He spin circles, barking hoarsely but fiercely as these kids pedaled by. Now, to me, that's a story about where we are in America. We're barking at the end of a chain that does not exist. Okay? We are barking furiously at the end of a chain that does not exist. We have the potential to make this happen.